In our last video, we discussed about the Islamic philosopher Ibn Arabi and his philosophy. In this video, we will discuss Sufism and the influence of Islamic mysticism by Ibn Arabi. To recap, Ibn Arabi, also known as the greatest master or Sheikh al-Akbar, was a prominent Muslim polymath, philosopher, and Sufi mystic who lived in the 12th and 13th centuries. He was born in Andalusia, modern-day Spain, but traveled extensively throughout the Islamic world, studying under various spiritual masters and absorbing a wide range of intellectual and spiritual traditions. One of the most significant influences on Ibn Arabi was the Sufi tradition, particularly the teachings of Ibn al-Arabi, his great-grandfather. Sufism, as you know, is a mystical branch of Islam that emphasizes the direct experience of the divine reality through love, devotion, and spiritual practices such as meditation and prayer. Ibn Arabi's own teachings and writings would go on to greatly influence the development of Sufism and other spiritual traditions across the Muslim world. In his works, Ibn Arabi presented a complex and nuanced understanding of the nature of reality, the human soul, and the relationship between the divine and the created. He rejected the dualistic notion of God as separate from creation, and instead emphasized the divine presence within all things. This understanding is often referred to as the divine unity, or Tawhid, and is a central tenet of both Sufism and Islam more broadly. Ibn Arabi also emphasized the importance of developing a deep connection with the divine within oneself and cultivating love and compassion towards all beings. He believed that each individual contains within them an essential aspect of the divine, known as the essence, or al-Dat. Through spiritual practice and disciplined self-work, one can awaken this inner essence and achieve a direct experience of the divine. In addition to his writings on Sufism and Islamic philosophy, Ibn Arabi also left behind a substantial body of poetry, which he often used as a vehicle for conveying his spiritual insights and experiences. His poetic works are celebrated for their beauty, depth, and philosophical complexity. Overall, Ibn Arabi's life and teachings have had a profound and lasting impact on the development of Sufism and Islamic spirituality, as well as on other religious and philosophical traditions around the world. His emphasis on the inherent unity of all existence and the divine potential within each human soul continues to inspire seekers of all backgrounds to this day. Let us now understand what Sufism is, and then get back to how Sufism influenced Ibn Arabi. Sufism is mystical in nature because it emphasizes the direct experience of the divine reality and the spiritual transformation of the individual soul. This experience often transcends the literal or external interpretations of religious texts and rituals, leading practitioners to seek alternative paths to union with the divine. The mystical aspect of Sufism is characterized by intense personal devotion, meditation, prayer, and the cultivation of love and compassion for all beings. In Sufi teachings, death is often seen as a doorway to a higher spiritual reality, rather than an ending. By cultivating our spirituality while we are alive, we can prepare ourselves for this transition and continue our journey towards ultimate union with the divine. The practices of self-discipline, love, and devotion that are central to Sufism serve as a kind of spiritual training ground, helping us to develop the inner strength and resilience needed to navigate the challenges and transitions of life and death. The concept of suffering is often viewed as a necessary part of the spiritual journey. It is not seen as something to be avoided at all costs, but rather as an opportunity for growth and transformation. While physical suffering may be alleviated through the attainment of spiritual enlightenment, the quest for ultimate union with the divine often involves embracing discomfort and letting go of attachment to worldly desires and comforts. That being said, Sufism also places great emphasis on compassion and the alleviation of suffering in the world. The belief is that by cultivating love and empathy towards others, we can help to create a more harmonious and peaceful world, even as we continue on our own spiritual journeys. So while there may be no more physical suffering in the afterlife, the spiritual work of compassion and service continues throughout the entirety of existence. Here are a few aspects and fundamentals of Sufism. 1. The path, tariqa. Sufism recognizes that the path to spiritual realization is not a single fixed route, but rather a diverse array of spiritual practices and disciplines that can lead one to union with the divine. These practices include meditation, prayer, music, dance, and self-discipline, among others. 2. The master, sheikh or murshid. In the Sufi tradition, the master plays a crucial role as a guide and mentor on the spiritual path. The disciple, murid, relies on the master's wisdom, experience, and spiritual insight to help them navigate the challenges and obstacles they encounter on their journey. 3. The heart Kab. In Sufism, the heart is seen as the center of the soul and the locus of spiritual experience. Through spiritual practices aimed at purifying and opening the heart, the seeker of truth can cultivate love, compassion, and awareness of the divine presence within themselves and the world around them. 4. Love al-Ishq. Love is a central theme in Sufism and is often understood as the primary motivation for embarking on the spiritual path. The beloved Allah is seen not as a separate object of worship, but as the very essence of existence, and the seeker's love for the divine is expressed through their devotion, service, and self-sacrifice. 5. Music and poetry. Music and poetry have long been integral to the Sufi tradition as vehicles for conveying spiritual insights and experiences. Sufi mystics often employed these arts as a means of connecting with the divine and communicating their visions of the sacred to others. 6. Hospitality. Dar al-Islam. Sufism places a strong emphasis on hospitality and the creation of a safe space where seekers of all backgrounds can gather to share their spiritual experiences and learn from one another. This principle is embodied in the concept of Dar al-Islam, which refers to the spiritual realm of peace and harmony that transcends the divisions and conflicts of the material world. 7. Death and resurrection. For Sufis, death is not an end, but rather a transformation and a rebirth into a higher state of being. The belief in resurrection and the afterlife serves as a reminder of the ultimate goal of spiritual practice, which is to achieve union with the divine and transcend the limitations of individual existence. These are just a few of the many aspects and fundamentals of Sufism. It is a rich and diverse tradition with a long history and many different interpretations and practices. Sufism has historically been more egalitarian and inclusive than some other branches of Islam in its treatment of men and women. While there have been instances of gender-based discrimination and the perpetuation of patriarchal norms within Sufi orders, there have also been many prominent female Sufi mystics and leaders who have challenged these norms and advanced the spiritual equality of women. In Sufism, the primary focus is on the individual's spiritual journey and relationship with the divine, rather than on gender-based roles and hierarchies. Many Sufi teachings emphasize the essential unity of all beings, including men and women, and view gender as a construct of the material world rather than a fundamental aspect of the divine reality. Female Sufis have played important roles as spiritual guides, mystics, poets, and scholars throughout history. Some notable examples include Rabia al-Adawiyya, a 8th-century mystic from Iraq, who is known for her devotion to God and her rejection of worldly attachments; Rabia al-Basri, a 7th-century mystic from Basra, who is famous for her love poetry; and Fatima al-Fihri, a 10th-century scholar from Morocco who founded the first university in the Western world, Al-Qarawiyyin. Today, there are many women who practice and study Sufism, and there are also many Sufi orders that are led by women or that have a strong tradition of promoting the spiritual equality of men and women. However, there is still much work to be done in terms of addressing gender-based discrimination and promoting greater inclusivity within the tradition. Sufism has had a profound impact on various societies throughout history, shaping art, literature, music, and philosophical thought. In terms of its influence on gender roles and societal norms, Sufism has played a complex and sometimes contradictory role. While it has inspired many women to pursue spiritual leadership and break free from traditional gender roles, it has also perpetuated certain patriarchal structures and norms within some Sufi orders. One of the most significant ways Sufism has shaped society is through its emphasis on education and learning. Many Sufi masters were also scholars and teachers, and they encouraged their followers, both men and women, to seek knowledge and cultivate their intellectual and spiritual capacities. This led to the spread of literacy and education among women in societies where they might otherwise have been excluded from learning. Additionally, Sufism's focus on compassion, tolerance, and the alleviation of suffering has had a transformative effect on communities, promoting greater social cohesion and harmony. Many Sufi orders have engaged in charitable work, established hospitals and schools, and worked for the betterment of the most marginalized members of society, including women and children. In terms of women's roles within Sufism, there have been many prominent female mystics, poets, scholars, and leaders who have challenged traditional gender roles and advanced the spiritual equality of women. However, there are also instances of discrimination and patriarchal control within certain Sufi contexts, and ongoing efforts are needed to address these issues and ensure that Sufism continues to be a force for gender equality and social progress. The role of Sufism in the daily lives of men and women can vary widely depending on individual practices and cultural contexts. In general, however, Sufis often integrate spiritual practices such as meditation, prayer, and devotional rituals into their daily routines. They may also participate in communal worship and study, attending gatherings at Sufi centers or mosques, or engaging in spiritual retreats or pilgrimages. For both men and women, Sufism can provide a framework for understanding and navigating the spiritual dimensions of everyday life, offering guidance on ethical conduct, relationships, and personal transformation. Some Sufis also incorporate physical practices such as dance, music, or whirling into their spiritual disciplines as a way of cultivating the connection between the body and the divine. In terms of gender roles, there is significant variation within Sufism. While some Sufi orders and lineages are more egalitarian, others adhere to more traditional patriarchal structures. In such cases, women may have different roles and responsibilities within the community, such as leading specific rituals or serving as spiritual guides for other women. However, there are also many instances of women challenging these traditional roles and asserting their spiritual equality within Sufism. Ultimately, the role of Sufism in the daily lives of men and women depends on the individual's personal practice, the particular Sufi tradition they identify with, and the cultural context in which they live. Sufism has had a profound impact on various societies throughout history, shaping art, literature, music, and philosophical thought. In terms of its influence on gender roles and societal norms, Sufism has played a complex and sometimes contradictory role. While it has inspired many women to pursue spiritual leadership and break free from traditional gender roles, it has also perpetuated certain patriarchal structures and norms within some Sufi orders. One of the most significant ways Sufism has shaped society is through its emphasis on education and learning. Many Sufi masters were also scholars and teachers, and they encouraged their followers, both men and women, to seek knowledge and cultivate their intellectual and spiritual capacities. This led to the spread of literacy and education among women in societies where they might otherwise have been excluded from learning. Sufism, as a mystical branch of Islam, has historically engaged in extensive dialogue and exchange with other religious traditions, particularly those of other mystical or esoteric paths. This interreligious dialogue has taken various forms, including shared spiritual practices, the translation and dissemination of religious literature, and collaborative efforts in areas such as social welfare and peace-building. One notable example of interfaith collaboration in the Sufi tradition is the exchange that took place between Sufis and Christian mystics during the medieval period. Many Sufis traveled to Europe during this time, bringing their teachings and practices with them, and engaging in dialogue and collaboration with Christian mystics, particularly within the Franciscan and Dominican orders. In contemporary times, Sufis continue to engage in interfaith dialogue and collaboration, often working together with people of other faiths to promote peace, understanding, and social justice. This can take the form of joint worship services, interfaith conferences and workshops, shared social service initiatives, and advocacy for religious freedom and tolerance. Sheikh Muhammad bin Yahya al-Ninawi, who was known for his peaceful teachings and efforts to promote interfaith dialogue, was himself an example of how Sufism can serve as a bridge between different religious traditions. His work in combating extremism and promoting religious tolerance contributed to building greater understanding and cooperation between Muslims and people of other faiths in Mauritania and beyond. Sufism, as a mystical branch of Islam, does have its roots in Islamic tradition and is informed by the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. However, Sufis have historically been characterized by their emphasis on personal spiritual experience and direct communion with God, rather than adherence to specific legal or ritualistic practices. This openness to spiritual exploration and universalism has led Sufis to engage in extensive dialogue and exchange with adherents of other religious traditions, including Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and others. In this sense, Sufism can be seen as a non-denominational mystical path within Islam that is open to individuals of all faiths who share its focus on personal spiritual transformation and communion with the divine. This inclusive approach has facilitated interreligious dialogue and collaboration, as well as the sharing of spiritual practices and insights across religious boundaries. Sufism shares some similarities with Platonic philosophy in that both traditions emphasize the pursuit of universal truths and the attainment of spiritual enlightenment through contemplation and introspection. Ibn Arabi, as a prominent Sufi mystic and philosopher, was deeply influenced by the mystical tradition of Sufism. His teachings on the divine unity, the inner essence, and the interconnectedness of all existence are all central tenets of Sufism. He also drew upon a wide range of spiritual and philosophical influences from both within and outside of the Islamic tradition, incorporating elements from Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and other esoteric schools of thought. In turn, Ibn Arabi's own writings and teachings had a significant impact on the development of Sufism and Islamic spirituality more broadly. His works were widely read and studied by other mystics and scholars, who incorporated his ideas into their own teachings and practices. In addition, Ibn Arabi's emphasis on the inherent divinity of all beings and the importance of cultivating love and compassion toward others helped to shape the ethical and moral dimension of Sufism, which remains an essential aspect of the tradition to this day. Ibn Arabi's philosophy aligns closely with the core values and practices of Sufism. As a Sufi mystic and philosopher, Ibn Arabi sought to understand the nature of divine reality and the role of the individual soul in relation to it. He believed that through disciplined spiritual practice and contemplation, one could attain direct perception of the divine reality and achieve a state of union with God. Ibn Arabi's philosophy emphasizes the importance of recognizing the interconnectedness of all existence and the divine presence within each of us. This idea of unity and interconnectedness is central to Sufism, as it seeks to transcend the limitations of individual identity and experience the divine essence that underlies all creation. In this way, Ibn Arabi's philosophy can be seen as a powerful expression of Sufism within the broader context of Islamic intellectual history. It offers a spiritual path that encourages personal transformation, self-realization, and communion with the divine, while also fostering understanding and harmony among different faith traditions and cultures. In the next video, we will further discuss Platonic thought, unity, the oneness, and how Sufism expands on the fundamental nature of physical existence and the relationship of seeking the path to the divine reality. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe to this channel.